Okay, that's not actually going to make it in the podcast.
All right, that's just for me. Thank you.
That was just for you. Should we begin again?
I believe that's what we're here for.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club.
So, Matt, what have you been up to since I last talked to you?
I have been up to absolutely nothing since we last talked because we stopped recording the first half of February 1967 mere seconds ago and then instantly launched into recording the second half. We could artificially create banter, or we could just go ahead and jump into the books from the second half of the month, shall we?
We will just go ahead and jump right on in. I get Fantastic Four. So, we are reaching another plateau in this ongoing storyline, which really began back in, the early 40s for this book, with the Frightful Four storyline, then leading into Inhumans, then Galactus, and Black Panther, and Silver Surfer, and now Doctor Doom, and now we're bringing them really all back together here.
Well, we're sort of bringing them together here. I mean, but we're sort of not.
I guess we're not bringing in Galactus or Black Panther or... you're right. I misstated that. I am going to do that over. No? Okay.
What I meant to say was that we've got huge developments in the Doctor Doom Silver Surfer storyline and in the Inhumans storyline, but they don't intersect in this issue. The Inhumans, we finally get what we've been building up to for 10 issues of this comic, which is we finally get to the Inhumans breaking free from the negative zone, but it has nothing to do with the Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four don't even know what's happening. They aren't there. It's sort of frustrating because the way the Inhumans finally do it is the way they could have done it all along. Just Black Bolt speaking. Like, we've all known that Black Bolt has a very destructive voice, and it sort of didn't occur to them until, I guess they've been stuck there for 12 issues now. Didn't occur to them until right now to have Black Bolt try to speak to destroy the negative zone. I find that a little frustrating.
Well, there was that thing where he had set himself into some kind of contraption, and then they realized it was going to destroy everything in some way, and so pulled him out. I was under the impression that that was somehow going to be powered by his voice, and they didn't do it because it was going to destroy everything and everybody. Well, of course, when he actually does use his voice in desperation because they still haven't gotten out, he also destroys everything and everybody. So, I mean, I think that's a good reason.
Well, he destroys everything. He doesn't destroy everybody. Everybody goes inside and they go down to the bunker and they're all fine.
Right. Good point. But destroys their entire infrastructure for their entire civilization, basically. So I can definitely see waiting until it's like, we have tried everything. Time to pull out the biggest gun of all. So Fantastic Four, in this earth-shaking issue, the Inhumans break free. Doomsday, we see on the cover, Black Bolt with his mouth open and the city of Atalan crumbling behind him. Then we have the Fantastic Four all sort of clustered around him with lots of action lines coming up. Actually, it doesn't look like action lines. It looks more like waves of energy that are being done with the sort of standard action line kind of lines.
Yeah, it sort of looks on the cover as if the Fantastic Four are there when Black Bolt destroys the barrier. And it looks like that's what they mean by Doomsday. Like, it is Doomsday here in Atalan. But no, the Fantastic Four will spend the whole issue fighting Doctor Doom, and Doomsday will refer to the fact they're fighting Doctor Doom. And of course, as we speak, they have announced that they are completely redoing the fifth Avengers movie to be one where they fight Doctor Doom, and it has now been renamed Doomsday. So, after this issue, presumably.
Yes, after the whole Mishigas with, Jonathan, what's his name?
Majors.
Jonathan Majors. And Kang and all that sort of stuff, which is a real damn dirty rotten shame. So, Doomsday, a Stan Lee, Jack Kirby modern-day masterwork. Delineation by Joe Sinnott, lettering by Artie Simek. So Reed is sending out a televised announcement to essentially all the nations on Earth saying there's nothing we can do. We've got to basically submit to Doctor Doom because all opposing him is going to do is get people killed, and there's really nothing we can do. And people are rebelling against this, including other members of the Fantastic Four, but he is sure of what he's doing. Russia, however, sends out some of its own bombers to try to obliterate Latveria, but Doom is able to create a corrosive cloud that disintegrates those planes. Now, this being the Comics Code Authority, even Russian commies are not allowed to be killed in these things, at least not noticeably. So there are parachutes with these people coming out. That very much reminds me of the G.I. Joe cartoon.
Yeah.
However, in this case, they are parachuting out of planes that were being disintegrated by corrosive gas. So they are being ejected out of their planes to parachute down through a corrosive gas cloud. I do not think that they are going to survive. I'm pretty sure that they are done. Bottom of page 4, final panel, is a really interesting angle shot that Jack Kirby chose. It's kind of a Batman TV show angle with Doom strutting through this corridor of Kirby tech at like a 60-degree angle to our horizontal.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. In film school, we would call that a Dutch angle or a canted angle, and it's very extreme. It's more extreme than the usual Batman angle or Dutch angle or canted angle. It's a really interesting panel, and completely Kirby just keeping himself awake here and keeping himself...
Yeah, especially for a panel that takes up about a sixth of the page. So Doctor Doom is going into his personal dungeon where he has the Silver Surfer subdued just to basically rub in what he's doing with the Silver Surfer's powers and make him more miserable. Reed is doing one of his tunnel vision, I can't sleep, I can't do anything else, I've got to just work on this and I will be here forever until I get this done sort of things that he does on a semi-regular basis. Do you have a memory of how Wyatt Wingfoot ended up with this little video communicator device that he has somewhere right now?
That makes sense. The last we saw, they were with Reed and Sue and Ben, and then Reed and Sue and Ben have sent Wyatt and Johnny back out, and sending them off with a communicator device makes sense to me.
So they are back in Asia looking once again for the Inhumans. They run across some soldiers. I'm assuming these are... No, this is in Asia. Where are they right now?
I can't tell what's going on. Yeah. They're up against American soldiers. So.
Right. There's a National Guard unit. Yeah. So I don't know what they're doing. I don't know why they're there. But one way or the other, Johnny gets into some kind of confrontation with the National Guard for some reason, and then they get in and they're very specific about this, they get in Johnny's Ferrari Dino V6 Berlinetta Special. He says that Jolly Jack informs us that that's what he's drawn, given to him, no doubt, by an oil-rich grandfather. Right, that's right. So this is Wyatt Wingfoot's car, given to him by an oil-rich grandfather who is definitely with it. So I guess that's another little bit of his backstory is, yes, he is Native American and went to a residential school, but apparently his family was able to maintain some mineral rights somewhere, which seems unlikely. But
it's right out of the recent movie Killers of the Flower Moon about rich Indian billionaires who have their money stolen from them by unscrupulous white crooks. So this feels like it is connected to that, which was already a story that was somewhat known. There was a movie that came out around this time called The FBI Story, which was the first film telling of the Killers of the Flower Moon story. Yeah, that's fascinating. I should say that the National Guard is shooting at Johnny with a solar beam gun, which is quite an awesome-looking gun.
Yes.
They are unable to hit him because he is flying so impressively.
Meanwhile, Matt and I... Our parents just recently sold some mineral rights for some oil in Texas.
Yes.
Our dad grew up in Arkansas, and apparently some ancestor of his had bought some partial share in an oil well, and it's apparently never actually been drilled, but every now and then when gas prices would go up, someone would lease the rights to have the possibility to drill there, and so my parents would occasionally get these checks just out of nowhere. So they finally sold those, though. So we no longer have those sorts of mineral rights, so I can no longer buy myself a Ferrari Dino V6 Berlinetta Special.
Well, no, now you have sold the land rights, so now you can. But no, we did not
yes.
get that much money.
No. I don't know what my parents got, but we haven't gotten anything.
Yeah, we haven't seen a cent.
Anyway, inside the negative zone in the city of Atalan, Black Bolt gives the command, by sign language more or less, to all of his people that they should all go into some kind of bomb shelters that they've got. Oh, and it turns out nobody knows that he has these superpowers. So you and I, having seen this, we're like, oh yeah, Black Bolt, if he speaks, then he'll destroy everything. But yeah, I guess they've never actually brought that up yet at this point. He's just been silent. But they've sort of hinted that he has some destructive secret. Here's where we finally learn it. Maximus comes up and tries to talk him out of doing it, but Black Bolt shelters him under his glider membrane, his glider wing things, and then opens his mouth, turns his head up to the sky, and lets his voice loose. And we see just this unbelievable wave of destructive force just knocking down and destroying everything in Atalan, basically.
Yes.
And it succeeds. It finally breaks a big hole in the negative zone, and they have their freedom at the exchange of their city. In Latveria, Dr. Doom is flying around on the Silver Surfer's board, leaving a trail of some sort of darkness. It's just something that absorbs all light. But he looks very much like the Wicked Witch of the West in the original Wizard of Oz, trailing the smoke behind him on his board, which looks almost like a broomstick in this particular case. And so he's just, I think, trying out his crazy cosmic powers that he has now. So he does this to his people, lets them be in darkness for 24 hours. He then goes to the Aegean Sea. It's always interesting trying to figure out where exactly Latveria is. The Aegean Sea is essentially between Greece and Turkey. Perhaps this is a kingdom in between Greece and Yugoslavia. I don't know. One way or the other. Doesn't really look like it, but who knows. So then he goes to this Mediterranean island and turns it into a frozen wasteland for 24 hours. He then goes to some part of the world that has a giant gorilla and turns it into some kind of weird, freaky monster. And all of these things he's having happen for just 24 hours, just to try things out. Mr. Fantastic is coming up with some kind of technological something that might be able to do something for him. He comes up with this Kirby Tech bat-looking thing that then he tosses at Ben, and it blows up, which seems like not the best way to treat Ben. And Ben doesn't think it's the best way to treat Ben because he starts to retaliate. Meanwhile, the Inhumans are emerging from their bomb shelter, seeing that they are now free. They don't seem to really care too much about the fact that their whole civilizational infrastructure has been destroyed. Crystal, of course, is like, yay, I can go see Johnny! Which, once again, that is in her character. They're both teenagers who are just absolutely lovesick for each other and would do anything to get back together. But she just seems to just walk away. Somehow she's going to go find Johnny on foot from here in Asia. I don't know exactly how that's going to happen. Also, one thing I find interesting here is we see the people that Black Bolt rules over. I think until this issue, we had only ever seen the royal family. Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't realized that until I read the Marvel index for this issue, the Fantastic Four index, which I read, which says, no, this is the first time we've seen any Inhumans other than the royal family. And it's the first time they've made it clear that the humans we have been hanging out with are the royal family.
Yeah. The Inhuman royal family gets into this weird air car. I guess they did do this to accompany Crystal, essentially. And so they are heading out of their trap. Meanwhile, Reed seems to have a bead on something that he can do. And we don't know exactly what it is, but he's having Ben help him build this precision-made device of some sort. We don't know what it is, but at the end of the issue, we just see that Dr. Doom is done testing out his powers and is going to conquer all of Earth next. But it says, next, the tide turns. So maybe we will not all end up living under the boot of Dr. Doom. We'll see. Let me see if I had any other things to say about this. Yeah, once again, this is one thing that I have as in terms of storytelling generally. So on the scene where the subjects of Black Bolt are seeing him come up ready to make his announcement, one of them says, "How magnificently he flies through the air. Truly, he is a king in every respect." And I'm just like, I like living in a republic. I don't see what the whole veneration of people as kingly is. I just don't get it personally.
Yeah.
It rubs me the wrong way, I guess. Also, there is a reference. At one point, somebody calls Black Bolt. It says, "Black Bolt, the Council of Elders has made a decision, one which will affect us all." Okay, well, at least there's a Council of Elders. I mean, that's not entirely a total monarchy, I guess. But I don't know if we ever hear about this Council of Elders again, do we? I don't know.
Never heard of or mentioned again, never seen, even in this issue. They mentioned that in the Marvel Comics Index for this issue. They're like, Council of Elders? What are you talking about? And never explained.
The one last thing is I just found one of the letters interesting enough to bring up. It is from a guy named Guy Houghton. He is a black man, or as he refers to himself at the time as Negro, which it's one of those things where it's like, I like to let people define themselves as they are, but that still, it feels a little weird to say so. It's interesting. He talks about just what an impact and what an effect seeing black people in the Marvel Universe is. And he talks about some of the, as you had referred to it, casual diversity and how much that alone is affecting to him. But then he also brings up Black Panther, but then he comes up with the whole thing about like, did you have to make him an African chieftain? Was that really necessary? But overall, he's like, I commend you for doing what you're doing and thank you for it, which I found interesting. Now, granted, they have a lot of different letters come in, and they're the ones who pick out which ones get printed. So they're picking out one of the ones that shows them in the best light here. So I do want to recognize that. Anyway, those are the thoughts of Guy Houghton of Bronx, New York.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I had not read this letter. It says, okay, one model complaint. Let's see how I can get this over to you. All right, so you've got a Negro superhero, but did you have to make him an African chieftain and whatnot? Couldn't he have been a plain American? I mean, if you had had an Italian superhero, would you have made him the head of a pizza stand in Venice and called him the masked Ferrari?
That's right. I'd forgotten that little line there. Yeah. Which echoes some of past guest Steve Bunch's complaints about the Black Panther as well.
Yes.
He has other ones in addition to that. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that one to attention.
Couple more notes on this issue. Page 1, Reed is talking into a video camera broadcasting into the world. It is an awesome looking video camera. It is truly bizarre, as with a lot of the technology in this issue, which is always great.
It looks almost like he has got a TikTok video ring light.
Yes, he does. On page 6, Dr. Doom is crouched over Silver Surfer with Power Cosmic seething from his hands, and it is an awesome panel of Kirby Crackle and the poor Silver Surfer looking completely abject. Dejected. I was combining dejected and abject as he is in a pile of straw at Dr. Doom's feet. I will point out that we do have a no prize book panel, not because of this issue, but because in this issue, they include the panel in the no prize book of Maximus saying, Black Bolt, you've done it. You've given the Inhumans their freedom. And then in issue 82, the Fantastic Four will return to Attilan and they will see the ruins of the negative zone barrier. And someone will go like, look, Reed, here's the negative zone barrier, which you destroyed when you freed the Inhumans, Reed. And the No Prize book will go like, no, Black Bolt did it, and he had no input from the Fantastic Four whatsoever, which is a little disappointing. I wish, we've spent so many issues with Johnny trying to reach Attilan, trying to help free the Inhumans, and to have him not even be there when it finally happens, I find frustrating. It's great to have big progress on the two storylines. I just wish they had found a way to integrate these two storylines and having them be totally separate. I do like Maximus as a character. I find that Stan Lee really enjoys writing Maximus. He's sort of this Shakespearean type character who tragically thought that by imprisoning his people, they would therefore recognize him as a great leader and elevate him to the position again of leader. I say that and it just sounds inane, but it really works. Stan Lee writes his dialogue very well as this sort of tragic character who, after the royal family leaves at the end, he's like, oh, good, they've left me in charge. And everybody's like, begone, madman, we have a city to rebuild. And gradually sort of realizes how much he's screwed over himself in his life.
And still, Lee and Kirby and Sinnott really at the top of their game. So there's lots of stuff we probably could have called out in here as really great, but it's just, there's so much of it that it's tough to do.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to Strange Tales number 153, featuring Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Doctor Strange. Nick Fury gets the whole cover to himself, and it is a beautiful Steranko cover with Nick Fury shirtless carrying the girl, who I believe is still never named in this issue, the daughter of the former Supreme Hydra.
I think you're right.
While Dum-Dum Dugan is flying a flying saucer to help him fight a bunch of Hydra agents. I believe that starting next issue, Steranko gets at least full art credit. He may start getting writing credit, too, with the next issue.
He starts getting plotting credit the same issue he starts getting penciling credit.
I think that's next issue. I think this is Kirby's last issue of S.H.I.E.L.D. It says, seldom equaled editing by Stan Lee, seldom surpassed scripting by Roy Thomas. Roy doesn't usually script this book, but he's scripting this issue. Seldom lacking layouts by Jack Kirby, seldom rivaled rendering by Jim Steranko, seldom legible lettering by Artie Simek. So we've established in the past that the way you enter the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters in New York is they have a fake barbershop that you get on the barber chair and it lowers you down into S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. Well, it turns out that they are very dedicated to this cover because Nick Fury is hanging out in the entrance to the building, getting an actual shave and, I guess, manicure from the people who run the fake barbershop. He is reading about Mystery Blast destroys Desert Outpost, which, of course, he really destroyed himself.
And I will point out, when I was saying 2 episodes ago, I guess, about how, like, that was probably a UNESCO site, and you were imagining what Nick Fury would say if it was panty waist at UNESCO, World Heritage Site, whatever. Well, right here, we basically get that. The barber who's shaving him is saying, a real shame about that Egyptian city being obliterated, isn't it, Colonel Fury? And he says, yeah, I'm all choked up about it, especially since that's where the HQ of Hydra was located. So we kind of get that here.
Yes. So then he tells them the whole story about the girl who was the daughter of Supreme Hydra. We get a whole flashback to that storyline. Meanwhile, Jasper Sitwell and Gabe Jones are driving that unnamed woman when they are suddenly attacked by Hydra coons on motorcycles. And Sitwell's like, well, our car can fly. We're going to be able to get away from these people just fine. It's not a problem. And then the Hydrocons and motorcycles like, wait, we have a secret weapon. We can jump off of our motorcycles onto the highway and then send our motorcycles crashing into the flying car. That wouldn't work for so many reasons. First of all, anybody can do that. That's not a special weapon. Anyone can be driving a motorcycle and jump off and go rolling on the highway and have their motorcycle crash into somebody. It doesn't take a special motorcycle to do that. But then seemingly they kill Gabe Jones and Jasper Sitwell and the girl. Amir Ali Bey, the current identity of Supreme Hydra, is celebrating, and now he's ready to change again. Now, keep in mind, he never actually came out onto the surface world to ever be Amir Ali Bey, so it's unknown why he adopted that identity. But now he is going to adopt a new identity. Meanwhile, Nick Fury and Dum-Dum Dugan like getting around in this flying saucer now, so they take their flying saucer out to go fight.
If I can interrupt for just a moment, here on page 5, up until now, this has not looked nearly as much like a Steranko book as the previous Steranko finished books have looked. It looks much more Kirby to me until we get to page 5. Page 5, in panel 2, Nick Fury holding that gizmo that he's putting into the flying saucer. That gizmo looks very Steranko to me. Their faces look very Steranko to me. And then later there's going to be a neat Steranko special effect that is, of course, very, very Steranko. But generally, this issue tends to look more Jack Kirby than the previous Steranko issues have, to me.
Yeah, you can make a case for that. There was a great Neil Adams Dead Man issue where there was some various psychedelic things going on, and you had to turn the issue on its side. And if you looked at it from an extreme angle, you could see that he said, wow, a Jim Steranko effect. That the mists were saying, wow, a Jim Steranko effect. I find the panel on page 6 where Nick and Dum Dum show up in the flying saucer and Hydra is trying to put their captives in a Hydra vehicle. It looks a lot like a Cobra vehicle from G.I. Joe. And in fact, when they created G.I. Joe, it started its life as a revival of this book. And that's why a lot of the characters in G.I. Joe are similar to S.H.I.E.L.D. characters. That's why, say, for instance, the Countess is so similar to the Viper and various things like that. Meanwhile, Supreme Hydra is getting a new identity as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, Agent Bronson. He then is quickly able to infiltrate S.H.I.E.L.D. so quickly that then he is able to join this attack and win the attack. He defeats his own people. He defeats Hydra himself. Nick Fury is very happy with this and is saying, Agent Bronson, you've got the run of the place. Bronson, who is really Supreme Hydra, thinks, the fool he has unwittingly played right into my hands. First I shall dispose of the girl, and then Nick Fury. Indeed, that's pretty much where we leave things off. And it says, but on the day that Hydra comes up with some kind of thread that S.H.I.E.L.D. can't stop, what happens then? And it says, next, what then? Yeah. And that is the end of the issue. So there is a case to be made. This issue feels more like Kirby than Steranko. Generally speaking, the art is a little sloppier in this issue than it was in his last couple of issues. But I think this is temporary and it's going to get tighter again after this. But a perfectly fine issue, perfectly fine plotting, and nice art.
Yeah, and page 12, panels 5 and 6, those look like they could be right out of an EC comic, which definitely feels more Steranko than Kirby.
Yeah.
Page 10, panel 1, where Nick is explaining that he's got some sort of electro-image distorter that makes it look like they're in a different location, so they're all aiming their fire at the wrong spot. But the way that Steranko illustrates this is he's clearly done a drawing of the four of them, Nick, Gabe, Jasper, and the unnamed woman holding off Hydra, but then has taken that finished art and cut it into vertical strips and then offset those strips from each other to make it look like you don't know exactly where they are. And that's just so Steranko, it's almost hard to describe in terms of thinking about how to bring this across visually. Yep. Yeah, so I'm excited to see where we go with this. I have not read beyond this, so I presume that we are going to find out next issue that Supreme Hydra is actually Strucker and see what happens. One thing I do find is it's always really unclear how high up the helicarrier flies.
Yes.
It's supposed to just be up in the atmosphere, but here it is clearly in outer space.
Yeah, because it's a helicarrier through helicopter blades. You would think, therefore, it would need some sort of atmosphere. It would not be up above the troposphere. It would not be up above where there is any sort of gravity. And it says soon above a massive helicarrier hiring high above the eastern seaboard. It's like, that is not above the eastern seaboard. That is above the planet Earth. You can see the curvature of the Earth. You can see a field of stars behind it.
Yeah, you were in low Earth orbit at that point.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's go ahead and move on to Doctor Strange.
Okay, this brings us on to a massive turning point in the Marvel Universe. For the very first time in the Marvel Universe, we have a lady penciler.
Cootie alert. Cootie alert.
Cootie alert. We're all going to get cooties because we're hanging out with a woman here. Doctor Strange, Master of the Mystic Arts, Alone Against the Mindless Ones, stupefying story by spellbinding Stan Lee, inconceivable illustration by mystical Marie Severin, legendary lettering by sardonic Sammy Rosen. So, we have seen the artwork of John Severin in this book. We have not yet met his sister Marie. They both got their start back in EC Comics, where John did a lot of penciling and inking, and Marie did all of the coloring. She was the colorist for all of those old EC comics.
I did not know that.
And was known as the conscience of EC, because when a panel would be particularly horrific, she would color it all one color to diminish the impact of it. She insists that she was not trying to censor the book, but just that she said she was just trying to serve the art as best she could. So then she worked for EC in the 50s. She also did some work for Marvel in the 50s. Then after the complete collapse of the comics industry in the late 50s, she ended up doing art for the Federal Reserve Bank of New York for a long time. And then eventually, now here in 1967, makes her way back to Marvel Comics after her brother has already been here for a while. She is an interesting person. She led an interesting life. According to Wikipedia, she never married, but she had a tight circle of friends. That certainly sounds like that's code for she was a lesbian, but I don't know.
Yeah,
But
you never know with that stuff. When I did my train wreck of a senior thesis in college, I was largely focusing on the famous New Yorker cartoonist Helen Hokinson. And that was the one question which hung in my head the entire time I was doing this, which is, she never married. A lot of stuff where it's like, and I just kept on telling myself, this has nothing to do with your thesis, Steve. Do not waste any research or time or effort on this, because clearly no one was clear on it and it's just not there. But then there was that thing in the back of my head, but, yeah, it's just because it had to all be done in code back then. And because of that, you don't know what is actually being encoded there or what is just coincidental. You don't know.
yes. So Bill Everett is gone. Marie Severin is going to be the rest of this book for a while. She will do some legendary art. One of her panels here on Doctor Strange will be used as the cover for the second Pink Floyd album.
Huh.
And I think she does a fantastic job on this issue. So we pick up where Everett left us off. Doctor Strange is fighting Umar. She has deposited him on the wrong side of the Mindless One barrier, so now he has to fight the Mindless Ones. He quickly realizes, I can fly and they can't, so this isn't the worst thing in the world. Umar is now looking very sexy. I think that Marie Severin does a great job with sexy Umar. I really love on the top of page 4 the way her hands look. Her hands are really beautifully drawn as she is sort of caressing her crystal ball, in which she gets to watch Doctor Strange fighting these people. At first, he can just fly away from them, but then she finds a way to short out his flying, basically, and he plummets down into the field of Mindless Ones. He tries to rescue Clea, who is being held in sort of a stasis beam, and cannot rescue her. Eventually, he realizes he has to sort of karate chop them to a certain extent, or kung fu kick them, and really get down in the dirt fighting the Mindless Ones. And then he eventually disguises himself as a Mindless One. He then is like, okay, I'm going to make another dive for it, try to rescue Clea. Doctor Strange finally rescues Clea, and then Umar says, that Clea you just rescued, she is actually a Mindless One in disguise. At which point Doctor Strange is like, but we were just making out. What do you mean she's Clea in disguise? And then Umar says, sorry, that's a Mindless One, and that is where the issue leaves off. I think this is really beautiful penciling and inking from Marie Severin in this issue, and presumably couponing as well. I really enjoyed this issue. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. And I do find it interesting that Umar, you were talking about how she looks sexier in this, but not just that. She also just looks more human. I mean, she just looks more like an actual person. So Marie is able to do both of those things at the same time here, which, a lot of people wouldn't. I find it interesting how she inks the Mindless Ones to very much ape the way that Steve Ditko inked the Mindless Ones, with these big, heavy, chunky feather lines all over them. Overall, I really like what she's bringing here. There are certain panels where I'm like, I'm not quite a big fan of that, but I mean, you're going to find that with anyone here. I really do like her karate kick on page 5. That's really good. Another really detailed, delicate rendering of Umar's face on the bottom of that page. Lots of nice textures, just some really great stuff. Meanwhile, I've been pulling up Pink Floyd's album covers and trying to find anything that looks like it would have Doctor Strange art used as part of it, and I am not coming up with anything.
A saucer full of secrets.
Oh, okay, saucer full of secrets. Okay, so I guess that might... Okay, I mean, yeah, I guess I can see how that might be a highly altered drawing from a Doctor Strange comic.
Yes.
But it's sort of put into kind of a psychedelic photo collage kind of thing, to where I would not have recognized that. Interesting.
Yes. Did you have anything else to say?
I don't think so. I agree with most of what you said, and I think I pointed out just some artistic things that I wanted to call out, but that's about it.
Yeah, really great to finally have a woman get to play in the Marvel Sandbox and do such a great job for her debut issue. I thought Bill Everett's run of the book was underrated, but I am very happy to have this new artist on.
Yes, I think that, Matt, but when we were talking before we were on the recording, you were saying that Marie Severin is a credit to her sex.
I never said that. That is not true.
You totally said it. I'm just throwing Matt under the bus.
I asked her for a pair of pliers. She gave me a flathead screwdriver, and I said, "You're a credit to your gender, Marie."
because you realize that's what you meant to say in the first place. Okay.
Exactly.
So, all right. So let's move on to Tales of Suspense, featuring Iron Man and Captain America. On the cover, it says quite possibly the very greatest action issue of the year. And we see Captain America in combat against a bunch of goons with red stars on their epaulets, but then a symbol that looks like either a Y or just 3 lines sticking out over a triangle. We will find out what is up with that in this issue, but not before talking about the Iron Man. The Iron Man. That's what he's called, isn't he? The Iron Man?
Yes.
Death Duel for the Life of Happy Hogan. Story Stan Lee, art Gene Colan, inking Frank Giacoia, lettering Sam Rosen, nail biting Irv Forbush. So the real Iron Man has finally shown up to try to rescue Happy, who is in the old Iron Man armor for reasons that we've already talked about in previous issues. So the Mandarin is going to go into one-on-one combat with the real Iron Man, while Happy in his other Iron Man armor is being dragged out of this dungeon by one of Mandarin's lackeys. So we get a great Gene Colan fight scene between the two of them, where the Mandarin is using a bunch of his different rings in different ways with, force bolts and ice blasts and all sorts of different stuff. And we see some close-ups of them when they will continue sort of the looks of these rings going forward. They'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, here's this one that's green with these little, parallel lines on it. Okay, well, that's one of his rings, so we always have to draw that on him. Overall, I really like the art in this fight scene.
Sorry, let me just say, so I grew up reading Mandarin comics and having the illustrated handbook to the Marvel Universe, which had a great Elliot R. Brown illustration of what each of the rings do. And I hadn't realized that when kids were reading these Mandarin comics in the 60s, they had no idea what all the rings did. It would just be, at any given point, the Mandarin would be like, now I want to freeze you. Well, I happen to have a freeze ring. Now I want to do this to you. Well, I happen to have a ring for that. And there was no attempt to systematically say what all the rings did until the Mandarin had been around for 20 years.
But they seem to be playing fair and keeping up with what they've done in the past, I think, as far as I can tell.
I don't know. I think they're playing fast and loose.
Okay, maybe so. So, and in this fight, once again, the Mandarin brags about how great he is at karate. In all the world, none is my equal in the deadly art of karate. Which, I guess, we have stuff about American martial arts masters who master other cultures' martial arts. So why not a Chinese man who masters the Japanese martial art of karate?
But he's got so much confidence in his karate powers that he tries to karate chop Iron Man's metal armor, and he says, in all the world, none is my equal in the deadly art of karate. What madness is this? Barehanded, I have split the greatest boulders in two. How can your armor resist me? You're really baffled that your karate chop didn't work against metal armor. I can understand being like, hey, look what I can pull off. But, you shouldn't be that surprised when it doesn't work.
Page 6, oftentimes I talk about how I've gotten less patient with Gene Colan's wacky panel layouts as I've gotten older. This one, it really seems to work with the action that's going on. So Mandarin has gotten Iron Man trapped in basically think the Star Wars trash compactor scene. And those crazy jagged angles that he's got the panels drawn at really kind of brings this across. You sort of feel how off kilter he is being squeezed in here.
Yeah, I like it.
Oh, and one thing I meant to mention earlier, there are some panels in here where close-ups on Mandarin's face that look a little bit unfortunate.
Yeah.
Not as much as you sometimes get, but I just did want to acknowledge that when I'm talking about how good the art is in here. Page 7, this is very reminiscent of the famous Spider-Man sequence where he throws the machinery off of his back. This also looks a little like old classic art of Samson knocking down the pillars and various stuff like that. But it's a really nice panel. And, this is one where it's like, yes, Gene, this is one where you were supposed to do a splash page.
Yes.
Eventually, Iron Man is able to knock out the Mandarin, and he wants to stay and finish him off, but he figures that Happy is still in danger. And so, unlike last issue, where, as you pointed out, he took his time actually getting there to rescue Happy, this time he doesn't bother to finish off the Mandarin because he realizes that Happy might be in danger. So He gets in and rescues Happy. He then takes the armor that Happy Hogan is wearing and programs it to take him to Okinawa. And so he doesn't have to do a thing. He just has to be in the armor. The armor will do all the work and take him there where he can then hopefully get a ride back to the US. Meanwhile, the reason that Iron Man had stayed behind is there was this missile that the Mandarin was going to use. This was his whole plot this time, to essentially start World War III between the US and China. Iron Man is able to use his technology in some way to redirect it to destroy the Mandarin stronghold. And then he flies off, and presumably the Mandarin and all of his minions are all dead. So,
Yep.
Good colon art, good colon fight scenes, nothing much going other than a big fight until the end when you get what Iron Man does to wrap things up.
You skipped over when Iron Man is fighting the Mandarin for the final time, and he takes off his gloves. Says, "Didn't expect me to take my armored gloves off, did you?" And the Mandarin goes, "But why?" And he says, "This is the showdown, Mandarin. I intend to beat you hand to hand. No tricks, no weapons." So this is sort of a classic trope of the white character versus the Asian character. And it's like, okay, you want to do your fancy karate chopping? Well, how can you handle a little bit of American fisticuffs? And then it's like, boom, how do you want a face full of knuckles? And then it goes ahead and beats him up with some standard American haymakers and proves the insufficiency of the Asian martial arts. So we had that sort of a cliched ending. This issue is perfectly fine. It's a big fight. It's nice that it wraps everything up and rescues Happy and seemingly kills off the Mandarin for a while. I think that this is a nice, big climactic finale to the storyline that works out just fine with some good art.
A couple other things that I realized I had noted here and forgot to see. On page 11, when Iron Man shows up and rescues Happy from the clutches of the Mandarin's henchmen, Happy says, Tony, I knew you'd get here somehow," to Iron Man.
What's the matter with that?
He's calling him Tony in front of other people. Iron Man.
Well, yes. I think at this point, everyone who works for the Mandarin knows, but yeah. And Iron Man is about to kill everyone in this building, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, yes, but Happy doesn't know that. Maybe he just killed everyone in that building because Happy said that out loud. That could have been Happy's fault. And then there's one point earlier when they're in the middle of the fight when the Mandarin is using his deadly disintegration beam, and he's saying, "I shall bring it closer and closer to you, savoring your last few moments of hopelessness." So it's basically like the Goldfinger laser moving closer and closer to you, or as you have described in that Superman movie I did not see, where the death beams are like slowly moving over there. It's just like, just move it. Just do the thing.
Yeah.
All right. Let us move on to another. This is an action-packed issue. They were not lying on the cover. There is just
yes.
a nonstop fight between Iron Man and Mandarin, and then this Captain America story is just dizzying in what we get here. So
we've got the second issue in a row that begins in medias res and crams a tremendous number of story into 10 pages by jumping right into the middle of it and ending right at the climax. I really love this Captain America story. I am a huge fan of it, and it is an excellent 10-page story.
Indeed. So it is called The Secret, Our Scene, the Yashinaka Arms Research Center, somewhere in the Orient. Yashinaka sounds Japanese, but presumably this would be somewhere else, but they're just very vague with it. Our star, a silent, stalwart Avenger named Captain America. Our pledge, high-powered action and thrills. They do not disappoint on that. Produced with Pandemonium by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, inking by Frank Giacoia, lettering Artie Simek. So we start with Captain America having already snuck up behind two of these presumably Asian goons who are in this Yashinaka weapons facility. He's able to knock them out. He then goes through and proceeds to just...
I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of the only art in this issue that I'm not a big fan of is Captain America here on this splash page. This is sort of a bad habit that Kirby has just started to develop that will get worse and worse for the next 20 years of drawing characters with their hips square to their shoulders. instead of at an angle as they always should be. And this looks like 80s Kirby. Cap on this first page in a very stiff pose with his body squared up too much. But I love the villains on the splash, and I love their weaponry, and I love a lot of stuff about it. I just don't like Cap on the splash.
I don't know. I don't think his shoulders and his hips are particularly square to each other. That one doesn't bother me. That one doesn't bother me at all. If I was going to call something out as some of the Kirby stuff that I didn't like when I was a kid, it would be the middle. I mean, I do like it now, but the middle panel on page 2, panel number 3. Yeah, I guess you could read it as energetic, but then it could also just look like I posed my action figure this way kind of thing.
Yeah.
One way or the other. We are nitpicking. So Captain America.
It's a beautiful issue. Yeah. You can't complain about it.
So Captain America is making his way through all of these goons. On page 3, there's this utterly fantastic design that Kirby has made of this like 10-foot tall metal humanoid robot that instead of a head has the villain who is controlling the thing with his 2 little joysticks where the head should be. And clearly he can swivel around in that thing differently from the thing. It's just this design for this just throwaway thing. It's not like this is going to be like, oh, this is a new villain that we're going to be seeing using in the future. Nope. It's just a one-time thing, and he designs something fantastic. Cap makes his way finally into a particular office where this one clearly Asian looking but not very stereotypically Asian, fortunately, guy is stuffing some papers into his jacket as Captain America comes in, as he hears someone coming in. Turns out this is a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who has been under deep cover. He is the one that Captain America has come to rescue him or to just act upon his intelligence? I think he just came to act upon the intelligence that he's been getting out here. But it's clear that he has been under deep cover for a long time, and it is taking a psychological toll on him at this point.
Yeah, he has snapped. This is Colonel Kuro Chin, Kurochin. Really nice job by Kirby at drawing a clearly Asian, sympathetic, really put upon, this poor character who is clearly a badass hero, but one who has snapped.
Yeah, and just the weight of what he's been doing on his shoulders. You can just see it.
Yes.
You can feel it. And we keep on saying we can't complain about the art in this issue, but there are a few little things. Page 6, panel 2, that's the kind of Kirby profile that I've never really liked. It just doesn't... It's extremely stylistic and does not look very much like people actually in profile. Yeah. But again, tiny little things. And it's funny, Cap, when he's seeing how, as he says, he's starting to crack, I've seen the signs so often before, he thinks to himself, I've seen it on a dozen battlefields. Combat fatigue, a body that's past the limit of human endurance. He can't help himself. Again, battle fatigue, actually, is what they used to call the thing they now call PTSD. Right. So I don't know if that would necessarily directly apply here, but still, Cap recognizes that this has just been an incredible toll on this guy. Cap is still hoping he can get that guy out of here or get him safely back to where he can continue doing his job or something or other. But in the end, he ends up sacrificing himself, running interference for Captain America, or I guess providing covering fire, I guess one would say, so that Captain America can get out and escape and destroy this weapons development facility that is somewhere in the heart of Asia, presumably in the hands of a communist-run government, although they're never really clear about any of that. Who knows? This might still be some kind of rogue Japanese faction that has never given up. I don't know. They're very vague on it. But one way or the other, Cap then looks like nukes the whole place. I don't know exactly what he did, but yeah, so that's it. It's just action from cover to cover, or, from first page to last page. And they managed to put in this really sort of poignant story of the deep cover agent and what that takes on somebody.
Yes.
And the big weapon that they decided they needed to come in and not just leave their agent there continually, but they had to actually go in and work on some actionable intelligence is something called the Z-Ray, which he is able to destroy, never to be built again. So who knows what the Z-Ray was going to be.
But they've also got a new type of weapon called beeper dogs, which are these robot dogs, which look like the actual robot dogs that have recently been invented and are quite menacing.
Yeah, yes, very good point. Yeah, I did notice that they look kind of like those Boston Dynamics nightmare things that will probably soon be rounding us all up at some point. Who knows? But the code names that he has for this operation, not very cody. When he's finally leaving at the end, he says, Shield Star, calling eye patch. Shield Star, calling eye patch. I'm like, yeah, I wonder who that could be. And he says also to Eye Patch, tell a certain blue-eyed blonde she's got a dinner date tonight with a certain Avenger. Is that Sharon Carter,
yes.
I'm guessing? Yes.
Yes.
I think this is the first time we've really seen something where he would be saying, hey, baby, we got a date tonight. I believe that's the first time that's really been put out there, other than, some of the stuff like, oh, she looks so much like the woman I loved in World War II.
But then whoever he's talking to, seemingly someone with the mysterious name Eye Patch, responds, well done, Shield Star. Lady in question not present. On new assignment. Top secret. Sorry, Avenger. And Captain America thinks as he goes away from the huge mushroom cloud he's left behind. After all this time, have I finally found her at last, only to have lost her forever. So he is not happy that she's not just sitting around waiting for a date with him.
Yes. Yeah, they did not lie on the cover of this one. This probably is the most action-packed issue of 1967, or at least of the past 12 months, let's put it that way. And yeah, it's great.
Yeah, really, really touching story of Colonel Kurochin, who is just beautifully drawn by Kirby and co-potted, presumably, by Kirby. And it is really heartbreaking, beautiful, done in one story. This is one of the best.
Where was that thing? It was on, I was reading an interview with Stan Lee that was put out in 68 or something like that, but apparently was actually recorded in 66. He was describing how great it was working with Jack Kirby because he would barely have to do anything for a plot. It would sometimes just be, hey, let's do Doctor Doom as the villain in next issue, or or maybe nothing at all. And so, Stan Lee actually describing the fact that he could just say a sentence to Jack Kirby and then that was the plot that he had provided. Yes. So this feels like one of those issues here, but who knows?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Great comic. It's absolutely fantastic. Okay. Let's go ahead and finish up February of 1967 with that comic, Avengers number 37.
I had not really looked at the cover at all when I was here. I just sort of flipped right past it to the inside. I hadn't realized this is Gil Kane.
Yes.
Gil Kane will essentially become the preferred cover artist at Marvel after Kirby leaves. And we're starting to get that here a little bit already. I noticed that the Captain America figure there looks almost like John Byrne. It looks kind of like actually the cover to Secret Wars 2 #1, the picture of Captain America on that cover.
Yeah.
That was just such one of the worst teases of all comics, just because that cover looked so awesome. And then Secret Wars 2 was... Anyway, but then also we have another color hold here on the cover for the force that's around Giant Man. And we talked about color holds several episodes ago with was it the original Adaptoid issue, I think? Mm-hmm. It's a nice special effect that was still in use all the way up into the 90s before computer color took everything over.
Yes, I like this cover a lot. It is Gil Kane clearly penciling and inking with the Avengers fighting Ixar's Ultoid. Unfortunately, we then open up the issue and see it says, electrifying editing by Stanley, scintillating scripting by Roy Thomas, invigorating illustrating by Don Heck, languishing lettering by Artie Simek. Once again, Don Heck absolutely hitting rock bottom these days as penciler and as inker and as co-potter. And this is a terrible issue to Conqueror Colossus. It's always been a pet peeve of mine when you show women, even beautiful women, when they're curled up and their knees are in front of them and they still have a pinched waist and back. Like, if a girl is curled up, then she may have an extreme badonkadonk, but she's still going to generally have a straight back.
I think what you're getting at is saying that, having an arched back while unconscious is, that takes some actual active use of muscles while you're doing that. And I will say on the Ultroids, one thing that I'm noticing here on this splash page, are there big black diamonds on their lower torsos or not?
It's very hard to tell. Or is that just supposed to be a artifact of shadow. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like there's none on the one on the left. There is something that looks like a shadow on the one in the middle, and then on the one on the right, it's clearly overlaying the tidy brownies, the bikini briefs that they're wearing there. It's just a mess.
It's a true mess. Last issue, it looked like Captain America and Black Widow would be free to rescue the Avengers, but now they've been zonked too, seemingly between issues. All of the Avengers are put in tubes, specially made for them. They hear the story, the history of Ixar and the Ultoids, which we will not get into because it is not worth learning about. Turns out they don't know that Goliath can now change his size, so he is able to get free and free everybody. They're fighting everybody, and then suddenly it's sort of nice to have Hawkeye figure out what's going on in this issue. Ixar becomes an actual guy. Not a terrible design on Ixar when he becomes an actual guy. He had just been a computer in the wall, and now he becomes a huge Ultoid himself. Well drawn by Kane on the cover, and drawn okay by Heck on the inside. They get in a big fight. I gotta say, the number one thing I like about this issue is that we finally have 6 Avengers. This book, for 20 issues, ever since issue 17, has just not had enough Avengers. They are often limping by on 4 or even 3 Avengers at any given time. To have this one big menace fighting 6 Avengers all at the same time, it's like, oh, this is a super group. This is a group of super people that is super when they all work together. And it's like, we haven't had that in a long time for no good reason on this book.
It's like people's complaints about the first 12 issues of Alpha Flight when we were kids. Just nothing but single character vignette stories. People are like, what? Come on, give us some team action.
Yeah, which they really did. It's nice to have Hawkeye figure things out for once. You know, supposedly they've still got the Burgermeister of the town kidnapped, but then Hawkeye's like, I don't think the Burgermeister's been kidnapped. I think he's actually Ixar himself. I will threaten to kill him. They're like, you know, what are you doing? Why are you threatening to kill me? He's like, well, let's test this. I'll kill you, and let's see how you feel about that. And then they're like, okay, we admit it. The Burgermeister is actually the bad guy. We will now drop the Avengers off on Earth and take off to other planets and leave. And it says next issue, Hercules, which is a wonderful addition to the Avengers. So I'm glad to hear that. That is it for this issue. This is absolutely hideously ugly issue. Looks like it was penciled and inked by a 5-year-old. I don't know what happened to Don Heck. He was not this terrible once upon a time. Poorly plotted issue as well. I don't know. I wouldn't go far as to say poorly plotted. You know, having there be a bit of a mystery as to the Burgermeister actually being in charge and having Hawkeye solve it. That's kind of fun, but not beautifully written and very poorly penciled and inked. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I'm not going to defend Don Heck much here, but there are some things where I kind of like the rendering of, you know, some of Ixar when he's in his big robotic form. There is some really interesting rendering on that stuff. But then on the other hand, you've got Scarlet Witch, when you get close-ups of her face, it's like she has just or any of the women. Instead of eyelashes or anything, you just get these big swaths of black. And, you know, actually in How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, John Buscema does say, oh, don't do individual eyelashes. Go ahead and do it as sort of a mass. But you gotta have some sort of texture on there. Otherwise, it just looks like they're doing goth eye makeup. So yeah, not great there. But one of the things I kept on thinking about was, this guy thinks that taking the powers of the Avengers will allow him to conquer the universe, right? So the power of Captain America, the power of Hawkeye, the power of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver and Giant Man and Wasp, maybe. But also, do these guys know what's out there? Are they aware of the Skrulls? Maybe they're just going to stick to this galaxy. I'm not sure. But, you know, they're going to get out there and going to find, like, oh, wait, there are all these cosmic empires out here already. What are we doing? We just have the power of Hawkeye. This isn't going to help us.
They've been warned, like, you should watch out for the Skrulls. They're in the 5th quadrant. And they're like, well, there's no such thing as a 5th quadrant, so we'll be fine.
Yes, exactly. Overall, I found the art quite lackluster in here. And, you know, I'm not generally a big fan anymore of Don Heck. But there's a lot of good textures in here. I've already talked about some of the things I do like about it, so I don't want to go on too much. A couple of other things here. At one point, the female Ultroid, and they sometimes put female in quotes when they're doing this, says to Hawkeye, To him, your Earth is but a stepping stone, a single pawn in a game which spans the cosmos itself. Again, when you get to the Skrulls, you're going to be in trouble. Hawkeye says back, Lady, you've been doing a lot of horn blowing for that eyed computer boss of yours.
Yes.
It's
not good.
Not great. I mean, I don't know that he necessarily looks Asian, so I don't know if that's necessarily a racist thing, but it's certainly often used as a racist epithet against Asian people, and one of those things that you probably just shouldn't use in general because of that association. Then when the flying saucer takes off, page 5, panel 5. Says, seconds later, leaving behind the enormous shell which had covered the Central European village, the disc-shaped ship departs from the Earth as mysteriously as it had come. And in that panel, it reminds me of the cover of the first Boston album, where they've got the city of Boston in a guitar-shaped ship that, as you see on Edge, and it looks very much like this. That's it. That's all I have to say. We can go ahead and bring this to a, what's the word I'm looking for? A well-deserved end.
Yes. So this is the last we ever hear of Ixar and the Ultroids, because they're terrible villains, and this is an entirely forgettable story. The only good thing that comes out of the story is that the Avengers are finally reunited and come back up to fighting strength again for the first time in 20 issues.
I thought you were going to say, and it feels so good.
Reunited and it feels so good. Yes, so every month we record if Marvel Comics ends on the Avengers, which is always terrible. And every time I'm like, here's how many issues we have until John Buscema comes on the book. We are now down to 4 issues. We've got 3 more issues of Don Heck, and then finally John Buscema will come on the book. So we are looking forward to that. But there were a lot of great Marvel Comics in February of 1967. Oh boy, that Captain America story may have been the best of the month. But there were so many great books. I loved the Gil Kane art on Incredible Hulk. I really loved the writing and penciling and inking on the Spider-Man story versus the Lizard. I really loved the Fantastic Four story, which just absolutely beautifully penciled and inked. And I'm so happy to have Marie Severin, the first woman to join the Marvel Universe, doing a beautiful job co-founding, penciling, and inking Doctor Strange. This has been a great month of Marvel Comics.
Yeah, I cannot argue with that. Of course, I went and saddled myself with 2 of the worst ones here with the order we did these in. But on the other hand, that means I still got Fantastic Four and Tales of Suspense. So, well, I will take it.
You'll get what you get and you won't get upset. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us again for another month of books, and we will see you soon.
Thanks a lot. Take care and stay safe out there. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Marvel Reread Club. Please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Your reviews and ratings are a great help and always appreciated. We love hearing from you. Go to marvelrereadclub.com to find notes and join the discussion about this episode. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. See you next time.